Today, I'm going to share with you 5 big poker mistakes. Realize that poker is a difficult game and you are going to make mistakes all the time. I make mistakes. The best players in the world make mistakes. We all do, both from a game theory optimal point of view and from an exploitative point of view. Everyone makes mistakes frequently. However, if you can make fewer mistakes than your opponents, on average, you will win. So today we're going to go through 5 of the biggest mistakes I see small stakes poker players make. Because if you make any of these mistakes, you're going to have a very, very difficult time succeeding at the medium and high stakes. Mistake number 1 is overplaying marginal made hands. Now, what is a marginal made hand? A marginal made hand is something like top pair with a weak kicker or middle pair with a good kicker, or pocket queens on a king 7-3-2 board. Too many people want to protect these hands. They bet them on the flop, which is often fine, but then they bet the turn big because they want to make their opponents fold out all of their worst made hands and their draws. The problem, though, is that this leads to bloating the pot with these hands when you do get called. And if you bet the flop and then blast the turn with middle pair, what do you think is going to call you? Well, either very high equity draws, like straight flush draws, which you're slightly ahead against, or hands like top pair, or 2 pair, or 3 of a kind. And against those hands, you are drawing very thin. So you want to make a point to not overplay your marginal made hands, which very often means checking these hands behind on the turn, and then if your opponent bets the river, you can easily call with your bluff catcher because your opponent should have a whole lot of bluffs in their range because they called your flop bet, it went check check on the turn, and if they can't win at the showdown, they should feel inclined to bluff. So make a point to not overplay your marginal made hands. Mistake number 2 is that a lot of players are far too entitled and they do not have enough grit. Realize that you Realize that you will run bad in poker. You will. I will. You will. Everyone will. It happens. If running bad in the short term causes you to tilt and play poorly, you have very little chance of success at poker. Grit is the ability to play for a long period of time, get unlucky and lose, and then show up on the next day ready to play your best again. There was one summer at the World Series of Poker where I had 0 cashes over something like 40 tournaments. 4-0. I would literally show up at noon, play great, get a double up or 2, and then on the last level of the day, I would get it all in, and I would lose. Happened about 40 days in a row. It was ridiculous. But you know what? It happens. And if you ask pretty much every top poker player who has been around more than 15 years, they've all experienced the same thing. Fortunately for me, I was lucky that I won a World Poker Tour tournament for $1 million shortly after it. So how did I show up every day for 40 days and get crushed, and then all of a sudden win a tournament for 100 buy-ins and a bunch of money shortly after? Well, I'm very gritty. I have excellent grit, and you're going to find that pretty much every top poker player who has succeeded over the long term is perfectly fine with showing up, playing great, and losing. And as soon as you understand that, as soon as you stop being entitled and thinking that you're supposed to win, especially in the short run, you're going to be far better off. Tip number 3, or mistake number 3, is not thinking in terms of ranges. Most losing poker players only care about their 2 specific hole cards. If you want to be difficult to play against, you must learn to be balanced, which means playing your range and splitting your range logically based on how the hand progresses. You also want to stop putting your opponents on an exact hand. If you listen to any small stakes poker players talking about a hand history, they'll say, someone raised from middle position, so I put him on ace king. Why can't he have ace queen or king queen suited or 7-6 suited or pocket 2s? He could have any of those, right? Instead of putting someone on an exact hand, put them on a possible range of hands, which is easier said than done. But if you actively work on putting people on ranges in every single hand that you play for the rest of your life, eventually it's going to become routine. And if you are always thinking about ranges, you can get a lot of practice and it'll become natural to you. And that's going to go a long way to helping you succeed at poker. Mistake number 4 is hero calling too often on the river. This is another mindset issue a lot of people have. You have to get rid of your ego, and you need to stop thinking that you need to see if they have it. You need to prove yourself right, that you were so unlucky that they outdrew you, or whatever you're thinking. All of these nonsensical thoughts going through your head are detrimental. Get rid of your ego. Realize that in the small stakes games, people do not bluff often enough, especially on the river. So many players get to the river with king high or 4 high or 7 high, and they think, well, they're probably going to call me. They call my flop and turn bet. I'm done. And they give up. An easy exploit against the player pool in general at the small stakes games is to simply fold when your opponent wants to put in a lot of money. Even in the high stakes games, don't tell my opponents this. Most people do not bluff often enough, and you're going to make a whole lot more money overfolding than consistently hero calling because they're not bluffing often enough. Mistake number 5 is not defending your blinds often enough. When you're getting amazing odds, you need to fight hard for pots. If someone raises to 2 big blinds and it folds around you in the big blind in a tournament, any suited hand is good enough to call. Now, you shouldn't be calling with total trash like Jack 4 offsuit and a 7-2 offsuit, but suited hands are great. Also, you want to make a point to 3-bet with a lot of suited connected type hands as well as your best hands. Many players are afraid to play marginal stuff like King 6 or 9-7 offsuit from out of position. But when you're getting good odds and you're closing the action and you're the only other person in the pot, your head's up, this is a great spot for you. A lot of players are unaware that they don't need to win these pots all that often in order to show a profit. Realize you're putting in 1 big blind to try to win what? Your opponent's 2, your 2, the ante, and the small blind. So 1 to win 5.5. You only need to get something like 18% equity out of this pot. Is that right? Something like that. You don't need to realize very much equity at all, and with pretty much anything reasonable, especially against players who don't triple barrel bluff often enough, which was the previous point, you're going to realize your equity well, and defending your blinds very wide is going to be very profitable. So that's it. 5 mistakes players make at low stakes. Let's recap them. Number 1, overplaying marginal made hands. Top pair, bad kicker, middle pair, under pairs. These are all hands that are happy to play medium-sized pots. If a lot of money goes in the pot with these type of hands, it's not good for you. Mistake number 2 is being entitled, not having enough grit. Stop being a baby. You're going to go on downswings. Get used to it. Tip number 3, or mistake number 3. Mistakes, tips. Mistake number 3 is not thinking in terms of ranges. You cannot put your opponent on an exact hand. It does not work like that. Mistake number 4 is hero calling on the river too often. Most players in most games don't bluff often enough, especially for a ton of money. So unless you have a really good reason to think they're being maniacal, overfold. And then, mistake number 5 is not defending the big blind enough. Every time you're in the big blind, almost every time, someone's going to raise, and then it's going to fold around to you, and you have to figure out if you should stick around. If you're folding far too often in the spot, your opponents are going to be stealing little bits of equity from you, and if they steal little bits of equity from you every time you're in the big blind, it's not going to work out for you in the long run. If you can stop making these 5 mistakes, you'll start to develop a nice win rate in the low stakes games, and that's going to go a long way to helping you win money from poker. That's it for today. If you have another mistake that you'd like to share with everyone in the comment section down below, we're all working hard to improve together. Feel free, go down there, type it in. Also, while you're down there, click the like button, click the notification button. Good luck in your games. Have fun. I hope you do not make these 5 mistakes ever again. And I'll talk to you next time.